The Golden Gate Bridge is the deadliest structure on Earth for suicide, and we want it to stop.
Our goal from our founding has been to resolve the suicide problem on the Golden Gate Bridge. Fundamentally, the medical community has known since the mid-60s that restricting easy access to lethal means is a way to reduce or prevent suicides. After the initial planning phase started, the architect the Bridge District hired came up with the net idea based on a successful installation in Switzerland.
It's actually very well proven that when restricting access to a highly lethal means of suicide saves lives. If they try and go somewhere else or use a different method, the likelihood is that they will have time to reconsider and be able to call for help.
That information has been presented to the Golden Gate Bridge District in the 60s and every decade since, yet nothing had been done, and it was relatively easy to prevent, relatively easy to solve.
Options were given to the public of raising the rail versus building a net. The net option was chosen by the public. Other places around the world where similar structures have had a problem with jumps and suicides, nets have successfully prevented suicides from happening.
One of the first bits of research we looked at was a suicide prevention structure, a taller railing that was installed on the Duke Ellington Bridge in Washington, D.C. A taller railing stopped the suicides at Duke Ellington. But there's another bridge, I think it's called the Taft Bridge, within a block or two where people could easily get access to it, but they didn't go there. It's a very important piece of research because it shows that people don't just naturally shift over to the next easily available thing.
Over the years, we've had to contend with critics who felt that it wasn't the responsibility of a public landmark like this to try to limit access to lethal means.
I think the biggest challenge that people throw to me is they're just going to do it someplace else anyway. I could go on for hours about how wrong that really is. There's so much now in the literature about the fact that if you take away the really, really easy access, people just don't do it. You know, you take, okay, 35 a year, let's just use that number. In 3 years, that's over 100 people. If you take this 160 or 70 million dollars and divide it all up over the next 100 years, then, you know, how much is a life worth?
It was education, doing studies, more awareness, and that's what eventually swayed the board district to go ahead and try and get input from the public on what barrier they would want. It was letting them know that it makes a difference.
We had two things working in our favor. First of all, we had the science in suicide prevention. The second thing we had was a coalition, really, of parents and family members and friends who had lost loved ones in bridge suicides who just refused to quit. They put their story out in public, they talked with people privately, they talked on camera like this. They were absolutely dedicated to seeing that the terrible loss they had suffered in their own families wouldn't have to be suffered by other families.
I didn't want anybody else to go through what I went through. And a lot of people would say, oh no, these parents are just doing it because they feel guilty because they let their child die. That's not the case for this situation. Yes, we all feel certain ways, but for this, it's a senseless loss of life. They don't need to die at that time. They can go on and live a full life.
We wanted to not have what happened to our daughter and to us happen to anyone else because we wouldn't wish it on our worst enemy.
A very good friend of our family, his son jumped from the bridge and survived. He was one of the founding members of the Bridge Rail Foundation. His involvement in that effort motivated both my wife and myself to become involved.
What we found was that by telling our stories over and over again, not just Casey's story, but every other story of another human being that was lost to this bridge has made a world of difference. And the powers that be in the Bridge District have said as much, that it was our personal stories that won them over.
And also because our daughter really wanted to bring the change that she wanted to see in the world. And she wasn't able to do that. And so we wanted to do it for her in her honor and as her legacy.
The biggest issue has been how society viewed suicide. It was a crime in many states for the longest time. People thought there was no way that you could help somebody who was suicidal. Then there was the stigma around mental illness. Families didn't want that. They didn't want somebody whispering behind their back, oh yeah, they've got that kind of child, or that husband's a little off because of something. So people wouldn't talk about it. People wouldn't go get the help they needed. And that was critical.
Nobody takes their life unless they're seriously depressed. The tragedy is that for many people, we don't know just how depressed they are until they take their lives. The people who ask for help in any fashion are generally people who don't kill themselves. People who are suicidal think that they've reached the point in their life of no return, that there's no hope, that there's no expectation that things are going to get better. The important message is that there's always hope. There's always a means to get better and feel better.
I think that's the crux of what the Bridge Rail Foundation is all about. The people that in that moment, they don't see any way out except that. If they can get through that moment, they can get by it and they can look back and go, wow, that was really a dumb thought. And our belief is that a suicide deterrent at the bridge will get them through that moment.
We've reached our first goal now. The funding has been approved. We expect the construction contract to be signed within a week of this filming. So that first step is done.
So as an organization now, what we're doing is turning our attention to helping other communities.
We have a broader mission to get the message of restricting easy access to lethal means out and understood, because it's not just bridges. One of the most powerful things we've learned in this is that there's something you can do in your own home to reduce the potential of suicide. If there's anyone who's at all exhibiting any kind of symptoms that you might recognize or that you might find in information on mental health, restricting easy access to lethal means is absolutely a way to minimize the risk. Simply, for instance, if you own firearms in your home and you have gun locks and proper safes for weapons and ammunition, you're going to reduce the chance of suicide. If you have powerful pharmaceuticals that could be dangerous if they're taken in high dosages, restrict access to them. Likewise, with any poisons or pesticides that might be in the home, there are all kinds of things that are part of the restrict easy access to lethal means message that are relatively simple to do, relatively straightforward, and they will save lives. Suicide is a very impulsive action in most cases, and if lethal means are not readily available, you buy time, and with time people can get out of suicide crisis and move on with their lives.
I think the public can educate themselves on the reality of suicide, what causes it. It is not something that is inevitable, that cannot be stopped.
If they go to the Bridge Rail Foundation's website, there are many studies, videos, all sorts of information of things have been discovered over the years, and they can educate themselves that it's just like having a broken arm. You don't hide if you have a broken arm. You don't feel like there's something wrong with you as a person, and people need to get over the stigma of depression and suicide and just get help and help each other.
It has nothing to do with age or sex or color or what country you live in. It's a universal issue, and we need to bring it out of the closet.
It's spreading the word. It's talking about it. If you see somebody look down, haven't been behaving normally, say here, take this, they start giving things away, that's kind of a sign they're closing things in on themselves, especially with teens. It happens a lot.
Young people tend to commit suicide at alarmingly high rates compared to older adults. The most important thing to do is just be supportive, to not be afraid to reach out and ask the person how they're feeling. We too often feel like it's none of our business, or we don't want to get involved.
Be open. Talk to each other, even if it seems difficult. I had a young man tell me I'd rather lose a friend than have him lose his life. So if you think you need to make a call to 911, make the call to 911, or to the parents, or to the sibling, or to the children, if you think the parent's in danger. Well, I had this one argument with the mother, and she kept saying, no, kids are just moody, my daughter's just having PMS. And I said, really? You're going to risk her life on that?
Our job is going to continue now until the net is actually completely finished in encouraging the Bridge Board and the other entities that are involved in this to continue to step up to the plate, because even though we now have funding, the cost of your tennis shoes next year is going to be more than this year. So how the public can help, think about this, talk about it, and think about making a donation, no matter how small.